Okay, let's get this show on the road. Hello everyone and welcome to another calm and relaxed talk where today we'll be talking about the Terminator franchise. Now of course we know as of 2019 there are 6 movies? Christ. 6 movies in the franchise, which span quite a different amount of decades from the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s and of course to our latest 2017 and 2019, with 2019's Dark Fate supposedly concluding the series. What I have here, of course, I don't bring props for the sake of bringing props, but for the sake of bragging. What I have here, of course, is the Terminator franchise on DVD, except for, of course, Dark Fate, because as of present, it is still in theaters somehow. So I'm going to go through the whole entire Terminator series and do a review of them all, and what I think of them. Now, I figured this will be pretty obvious as to what I think of them, because, I mean, it's a series that conveniently has an obvious set of popularity. However, I'd still like to discuss them given how much they have varied over the past few decades. Now, of course, we'll be starting with the first off, The Terminator. I hope to also have a poster here. This film, of course, this one was released in 84. I have to remember because 86 Cameron did Aliens. So in 84, which also kind of works really well for the kind of Orwellian thing. Oh crap, I gotta find my reviews for this stuff. Oh yikes. So in 1984, James Cameron wrote and directed and probably produced as well The Terminator, which is, as most of us know, a robot is sent from the future, or a cybernetic organism is sent from the future, the year 2029 AD, back to 1984 to terminate Sarah Connor, whose son, who has not been born yet, will command and lead the resistance against the robot army that destroys humanity. The Terminator. I gave it 4.5 stars. My quote, "You're dead, honey." My review. The one thing the sequels don't get right, past Terminator 2 that is the Cold War tension and the metallic version of the theme song. It's kind of weird to call it a theme song, but we all know the iconic Terminator theme. And because you have that punchy dun 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 dun, usually it's, at least in the first two, it was conducted with a very metallic percussion instrument. If I knew what the instrument was called, which I'm very sure I've played one before, definitely isn't a timpani, but it's something close. But it's metallic, and that emphasizes the metallic robots in the future, the focus on the technology being evil, that kind of stuff. It's really really works with the themes of the film, and that's why the rest of them don't really do that. They still have that sound, they still have that tune in the rest of the franchise, but they don't have that sound effect, which works, I think, a lot better and really hits it much harder to how scary this kind of perspective is, this kind of version of the future could be. So the rest of my review goes, I remember seeing this in theatre at the Astor for its 4K remaster alongside the 4K remaster of RoboCop. And, of course, I brought a friend who'd never seen them. He wouldn't actually stop complaining about how the time travel makes no sense, so that was fun. But either way, this time around I watched the Blu-ray, which I'd never actually seen the Blu-ray before. I'd only ever watched the DVD in the past. Then I watched it, in 4K at the cinema, gorgeous. And then I got this Blu-ray, which I'm very sure is a very close to 4K remaster, as they haven't actually released a 4K remaster of the film. But yeah, the visuals are stunning. The audio in particular is very crisp and has is very dynamic with its sound effects and use of music and overall design. So again, 4.5 stars. I've watched this film since I was a kid. It's funny because I'm still not used to doing these calm and relaxed videos, so I kind of want to give you an idea of what the film is like, whilst also giving my perspective on it. So, as I've told you, pretty much the generic plot, the cybernetic organism, the robot, which actually has human skin on it, and so looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger, comes back in time to kill Sarah Connor. But also Kyle Reese, who is a lieutenant in the human resistance, is also sent back in time to protect Sarah Connor. And of course, in this one, Sarah Connor's innocent. She's a regular. They even say, like, she's just a waitress, she's just a regular girl. You don't expect it, and that kind of emphasizes the horror of the film. That she's such an ordinary, everyday person that it's like, oh my god, this could happen to everyone. It's like the aspect of Halloween, and what made that really scary was the fact that even though Michael Myers was this, crazy, almost like godlike serial killer, like there was just something unhuman about him. The main characters were all just random humans, and that's what made it so scary. The random human aspect and the fact that it was urbanized. And this one as well is quite urbanized. They still have shots of the future, but they very much restrict themselves from that because, of course, it was actually a low-budget film. You wouldn't think, but it actually was, because their low-budget 80s films actually look really freaking good. And even though you'd say that they have cheesy and dodgy special effects like the stop-motion Terminator that they have at the end of the film, at the same time, they have a stop-motion Terminator. These days, you just get a CGI one, and it just doesn't look as creepy, It's like these days, it's like, oh, look, they look at the camera, how creepy is that? The red glowing eyes and their perfectly, metallic body, and it's just like, okay, but in this one, it's stop motion, and that's really cool because it's clanky, it's awkward, it's cool and scary because it's unpredictable. Also, the fact that it's still alive after having all of its flesh burned off. Minor spoiler, I guess, for the end of the film, but at the same time, you kind of get what you're getting. The main thing I'd want to say about this film, outside of really getting those Cold War tensions really, really, really accurate, because of course it's a nuclear war that happens in the year 1997, and so this film is less about stopping that, but more protecting Sarah Connor, and so Kyle Reese is a good guy, he's more or less the hero, he's cool, he's still very much a regular human, because of course he's a soldier, so he can use soldier military techniques, but he's against a bodybuilder robot, a very impossible and hard to defeat enemy, which is a nice contrast and adds to the fear, especially. So you've got Sarah Connor, who you pretty much just are Sarah Connor, and you're scared, of course, because you're scared for her, you're scared for yourself. Then you've got this guy who's a soldier, yes, but he's still not as strong or powerful or even better remotely than the Terminator. And then you have the Terminator, played by Schwarzenegger, who is amazing. The robotic-like features he portrays, really everything he does is incredible. Now, yeah, of course, he has these kind of mildly awkward line deliveries because he is still... it was still one of his first ever roles as an actor. And even, a lot of us know about this behind the scenes stuff of how, with the famous "I'll be back" line, he said to James Cameron, hey, why don't I just say "I will be back," because I can hardly pronounce "I'll," because of his Austrian accent, but at the same time, he also thought it's more robotic, because why would a, robot say "I'll"? It would say "I will be back." And of course they were like, no, just say "I'll be back." And he said, alright, cool, I'll just say I'll be back. And most iconic line probably in the film, outside of the other one, which is like what? There's the "no fate, but whatever we have, no fate, but what we choose," whatever the crap. That one that becomes the theme throughout the rest of the franchise and is the excuse for the rest of the franchise. And "come with me if you want to live," Again, most of these were just throwaway lines, but they just sounded really cool when they were done and really emphasized, and of course they became like slogans for the rest of the franchise, which pretty much after the second one just kind of stopped being cool. Yeah. Schwarzenegger is definitely the perfect villain in this film, and that's definitely what the other films don't have, because in the rest of the franchise, he's not the villain. He never actually reprises his role as a villain, except for more or less in the fourth one, but even then, he's in there for like 5 to 10 minutes as a CGI Arnold Schwarzenegger, which isn't a problem, but more or less, it doesn't exactly capture the essence that the first film had. And we'll get to that later. So yeah, 4.5 stars for the Terminator. It's my favorite of the franchise. It is the best of the franchise. And I know a lot of people will be like, "What? No, but Terminator 2: Judgment Day is a better film." We'll get there in a second. I don't really think I have much else to say about this film. It's very tight for its narrative. The romance is a bit very 80s. It's a bit slow and kind of mildly boring in the middle once they're like kind of escaping the Terminator. But like between all the really really top scenes, so pretty much the stuff when they're in the motel, it's kind of eh. But then it allows the humans to connect more, so that kind of tension of the Terminator could be anywhere. It builds up to that, which gradually improves, of course, to everything else that happens in the rest of the film, as in the final escape and the final fight scene, pretty much. So, yeah, overall, really well done film, highly recommended. Then, of course, I actually have the DVD as well, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Now, the DVD version I actually have is the extended cut, which they say is the director's cut. It is not. It's the extended cut and has just an extra scene or two, which I grew up with watching, and I never really realized that they didn't actually have that in the 4K remaster, so that was interesting. For context as to which scene it was, it's the scene where they open up Schwarzenegger's head, because he's, of course, the robot, to take out his memory core chip thingy and replace it with a backup one or something. It's not really a necessary scene. It was a scene that is kind of really, it's an alright scene, and even James Cameron said, they don't really need it in the film, What can I say about Terminator 2: Judgment Day? Now, firstly, I will note on the 4K presentation. Look, I still think it looks really good. It looks like it was shot yesterday. That's how well the 4K is. The problem is that a lot of film fanatics, I mean, kind of myself included, because I'd like to see an alternative approach to it, is the lack of film grain. Because the 4K remaster is actually a digital restoration that was made for the 3D remaster and re-release of the film. So they've completely taken out all of the film grain, and a lot of people will be like, most average audiences won't give a shit because they're like, who cares, it looks really good. They don't even know what film grain is, they're just like, oh, it's dots and specks and stuff, yucky. There's the difference between film grain and film dirt. Dirt and specks and rubbish and stuff is the stuff that scratches up the film, is what actually inevitably destroys it and removes the picture, whereas film grain is actually the light balancing with the film strips itself. It's hard. I feel like it's hard to explain from my end because I'm not 100% on it. But at the same time, in looking at this, which was actually done by James Cameron, he not just writing and directing the film, producing it. He also, when they remastered it, he was the one who supervised it, because he was making sure it was going to be for a good release for the 3D remaster, a 3D version I've never seen because I just don't care about 3D. And I don't mind. Like, I've seen some films that have had their film grain practically completely removed and they look like they were shot yesterday. Some films get away with it. Some films look really good like that. I think Carnival of Souls, which is like a 1962 horror film, which Criterion did, it has a very, very minimal amount of film grain, probably enough of a natural level that it doesn't take away from the image at all. And it looks like it was filmed yesterday. That's how crisp the 4K is. And that's like this. Except this is no film grain whatsoever, except in like one tiny scene where they have a certain special effects shot and you can see the grain. And it's like, oh, so that's what it would have looked like. Except that's a really dirty version of the grain, so you would have gotten it much cleaner otherwise. So, look, if you like the film, you want to get the 4K as it is. The 4K, this 4K/Blu-ray remaster still looks terrific. It's mainly the big film buffs who care about the organic nature of film as to, oh, I want to see it like I saw it back in 35mm in theaters in 1992. Yes, I'm going to say 1992. I think it was either 92 or 94. Either way, it doesn't say on this because it just says 2017 because it's like, this is the 2017 version, and that's really stupid, and I hate when they do that. So that's great. Maybe it was 91, actually. Oh, 91, okay. So what can I say about Terminator 2 Judgment Day when I find my review for it that I totally reviewed? Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I gave it 4.5 stars. My quote, anyone not wearing 2 million sunblock is going to have a bad day. My review, it's too bad Dyson destroyed the world through making vacuums. It's a joke because the Dyson who makes Skynet, and then Dyson, the vacuum cleaner company, and air conditioner company. Anyway, I thought it was a funny joke. Anyway, in brackets I was going to give this 5 stars based on nostalgia. That being said, I'd say it's more a 4.5 star film, and I'm one to argue that The Terminator is a better film based on a tighter story, focused characters, and Arnie as the villain, a petrifying villain. I'd also say that this film boils down to quotable Arnie versus whiny John Connor. Now, of course, the problem with John Connor in this film is the fact that he's whiny as hell, but at the same time, he also is 13 years old, so, live and let live. In this film, it's the same kind of premise, except now we're following John Connor's character as a 13-year-old kid who needs to be saved by the Terminator. Arnold Schwarzenegger plays the Terminator that comes back in time, reprogrammed by John Connor in the future, to protect him and be like a surrogate father to him, at least thematically. And they also need to break out Sarah Connor from a mental institution because she thinks robots from the future are going to come down and destroy everyone. The 80s and the 90s. And Cold War paranoia, which still is a theme in these movies because this is still set during the Cold War. Very well done. Now, of course, you do have much more future scenes with the humans fighting the robots, and because it's a much bigger budget film, it looks spectacular. The special effects in particular, Stan Winston, I believe, still did the special effects for this film and for the first one. And I think the third one was maybe his last of the franchise. Either way, they still look exceptional. This one looking better than the first one because the first one, obviously a much lower budget, and had stop motion, whereas this one has, I wouldn't say it has digital versions of the robot version of the Terminator, but if it is stop motion, it looks a whole lot better. So I don't think it was, I think it was puppeteering actually. Nevertheless, the bad guy is the T-1000, played by Robert Patrick, I believe, who is a liquid metal version of the Terminator. Now, I didn't understand what the liquid metal how the hell does liquid metal turn into anything, and then I realized it was actually until I rewatched Genesis that I realized that they actually program the metal, and I'm like, okay, very sci-fi, I like it. Doesn't make any sense, but it's still cool. Robert Patrick is more of a focused, stoic villain. He's scary, but he's not scary, He just seems like he's like the Thing, a regular human dude who happens to be just with a bit of a, log up his ass. But at the same time, because he's actually plays a cop pretty much, but not really, he just takes the costume of a cop. And that allows him to get around very, very clever for how his character gets around. But his character is like a monster underneath, because when they shoot him and he splits in half and stuff, which is so great with the practical and the CG effects, he just becomes a monster, pretty much. Which does make him scary, but not as scary as Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator. Because, Robert Patrick is just a regular, skinny-looking dude. It's like, what if Carl Reese was the bad guy? But he was made of liquid metal, and he had no real personality outside of, So he does work as the villain, and he's probably the only other good villain that the franchise really ever has. And that's really what I can say about him, but he's definitely he's no Arnold Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger is so much better as the villain. In this film, of course, Schwarzenegger is the hero. You have young John Connor, who's a whiny kid, but he's got some edginess to him because it's the 90s. Kids are allowed to be edgy now. It's cool. He drives a dirt bike, and swears and stuff. But he also has morality and a soul to himself, so he teaches the Terminator to pretty much become human. And then, of course, you have the mother, who's crazy as all hell, but she's like an awesome action hero now. So it's a complete reversal of the original character that she was playing in the first one. Now, this is still Linda Hamilton reprising her role, so that was really cool. Nice change, and so, of course, now the weaker character is literally the kid. Fair enough. What can I say about the story? It's a long film, and it keeps going, and it keeps going. It's just go from point A to point B to point C to point D, and every way you've either got cops or the T-1000 trying to stop them, and it's cool because it's a awesome thriller of an action film. It's not a horror anymore. The first one was a horror film, horror more so over action, but still, like, action and sci-fi was like the basis, but it's mostly horror. This one is now action film, slight nature of comedy and kind of family stuff. But the family's more or less the themes. The comedy is the fun stuff, especially with Arnold Schwarzenegger learning all the lines, the "Hasta la vista, baby," all these fun lines, and then doing all these fun things. It's like, oh, cool! Look, the robot can smile. It's awkward, funny. Cool. I loved it as a kid. Everyone loves this movie. I don't know anyone who doesn't love this movie, and it is notoriety more popular than the original. And that's to say because this one, when it came out, was more popular and bigger than the original, because this original was just it was like a small indie film, more or less, like an 80s indie film, if you will. So a lot less people saw it, a lot less people connected to it. When this one came out, Schwarzenegger was big, huge, everywhere. They loved him. Everyone went to see this movie. And it's only rated M. It's not overly big on its blood and gore and violence. It's still very violent and doesn't really have much blood and gore, and I realize now that, even the original is still at least rated M. I just realized most of the Terminator films are, like, rated M. The DVD says M15+, but that's probably because they had the head being cut open scene. Actually, I just realized they're all rated M, but, like, some of them are different in their accounts of violence, which I feel like is notable, because, like, the latest one, Dark Fate, is, like, MA15+, or it's rated R in America because they actually have blood and stuff, and I realized that only in these ones never really had that. Like, they still have blood per se, but it wasn't like blood oozing from spots and stuff. It was just here and there. But again, this is also different levels of restrictions back in the day. So yeah, this is violence in coarse language, aka a lot of action violence and a lot of swearing, but not a lot that makes it annoying or anything. It's fun. Because I watched these films as a kid, because of course I could. I was allowed to. Hell, even Star Wars was M15+ back in the day. This is, I think it was like Attack of the Clones, maybe, because of the violence. Maybe it was Revenge of the Sith. Either way, one of them was. Yeah, so Schwarzenegger is still great as the hero, but it's just because he's a cool action hero and he can say quotable lines. In terms of character, he definitely builds onto one and has a good character in the film, but he's just better as the villain. And that's just how I see it, at least. Still, it's a terrific film. Again, 4.5 stars, 100% worth watching. You could watch it without the first one, because the first one... the second one has enough exposition about the first one that it's fine, but the first one gives you a better juxtaposition with the Terminator and all this kind of stuff, and I like it. It's the perfect double feature in my mind, or at least one of the perfect double features. And of course, Terminator 2 is noted as one of the greatest sequels of all time, but it's just one of the things of how to make a good sequel. Pretty much flip everything on its head, or expand on things. And this one more or less flips it all on its head whilst also expanding things. Like, now you've got John Connor, but Sarah Connor's a hero now. She's a badass, and the Terminator is the good guy, but the other Terminator, there's a new one and he's even deadlier, is the bad guy. And the story is much more involved with saving the human race. It's one of those, again, Judgment Day things, and that really works. So they're definitely two very different films, and they're both very good. And the second one is a lot longer, so the pacing's a lot more off, and it gets a bit boring in the middle, especially when they're in the desert. And it's just like, look, they're loading up their trucks with guns, and we're exploring the themes of the movie, where it's just like, Sarah Connor monologuing through narration of like, there is no fate, look at the boy, and having this father that is a robot that will never age and never discipline him, and all this stuff. It's like, Jesus Christ, I'm kind of bored. When you have so many great action scenes and then you just go straight to, look, let's talk about themes and character for like 20 minutes, it's kind of boring. Like, I'm one of those people who's like, I love the exploration of themes and character, but if you're like sandwiching in between all these great action scenes and you just want more adrenaline, it kind of makes you fall asleep. So hence why it's 4.5 stars. And because of whiny John Connor. Just, his voice is so annoying. Like, he's an alright character because he's a 13-year-old kid, but it's like, yikes. Let's talk about Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. Is it weird that I have it? It's actually, it's legitimate disc. I just happen to have it in the disc case for Terminator 2 because I don't like Terminator 3 that much. Or at least, I think it's like a bootleg version, but I don't think it actually is because it even has the appropriate print on the front that makes it look like a DVD. So I think it's just a legitimate DVD that we just took out of its Terminator 3 box. But I don't think we ever had the Terminator 3 box. Someone just family member must have just had a spare. So let's see, Terminator 3 from actually 2003? Yeah, weird. This one's directed by Jonathan Mostow, who I've never heard of before, and written by a lot of producers, written by 3 other people, none of them being James Cameron. I gave this film 3 stars. My quote, we stopped Judgment Day. My response, yeah, so why does this film exist then, if you stop Judgment Day? And this is where the franchise takes a turn for the worst. The remainder of my review, Terminator 1, what if your ex was an unstoppable robot killing machine? Terminator 2, what if the Terminator was a dad? Terminator 3, what if the Terminator was an angry stepdad? Also, a quote, you remind me of my mother, which John Connor says to Claire Danes' character, who becomes his wife. At least they say she's to be his wife. So it's kind of disturbing. Very, that psychologist dude thingy. So that's fun. I forgot what his name was, but who really cares? So this is where the franchise turns down for a worst. Now, it still has Arnold Schwarzenegger, in his final good role. No, his final good role was in the second one. He hasn't really played a good role in these films ever since. Now what can I say about it? Plot-wise, who gives a shit? Terminator sent back in time to save Claire Danes' character, and just happens to run into John Connor, and they need to save Claire Danes because her character and a bunch of other characters are all the lieutenants that, take over after John Connor dies in the future. And I love how they say how he dies, because this is the Terminator that is sent back in time is the one that actually kills him, because it's like, Skynet's like, oh, well, if we send one that looks like this guy back in time, and he became like a father figure, then maybe if we actually use that against John Connor, he'll think that it's his dad again, and then he'll be able to get killed, because the Terminator is just a Terminator, and he's an idiot. Because John Connor apparently is an idiot, which is great. So that's the thing. And then the rest of the movie is run away from the other TX, I think it's called, which is a female version of the Terminator, which is interesting. It's like still liquid metal, but it's on top of a metal exoskeleton, which is also pretty much what they use for the rest of the franchise. Metal exoskeleton, but with liquid on top, so you can have the metal robot part, and it looks really cool. It allows you to use some practical effects as well as using digital effects, which is a nice balance, until the rest of the franchise just decides to go full CGI. Actually, not Salvation, but like Genesis and Dark Fate. Anyway, and the plot is they run away from evil Terminator. Arnie has to protect them, and then the world ends, because it's still Judgment Day. It's Rise of the Machines. Judgment Day has just been delayed by like 10 years. So now, boom, Judgment Day world blows up. Who cares? So that's the plot. in terms of the aspects of this film that are commendable, there isn't really much. Like, this film is like a combination of Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, except it's boring and doesn't really isn't very fun. Like, you still have some great action set pieces, the best one being the one with the crane, which goes for like 10 solid minutes, and it's really cool. And it's not too badly shot, but it has some uses of CG, but it takes advantage of practical effects, and it's really well done. And it's really the only commendable part of this whole entire movie. Schwarzenegger is terrible in this one. He becomes a parody of himself to, winds up, because they all spawn in naked as a Terminator, pretty much anyone from the future. And then he goes into a bar, which also happens to be a strip club, and it's ladies' night, and he takes this clothing from a gay guy who happens to be a stripper for women, and they're playing YMCA or who did the song YMCA. Was it Men at Work? I don't know. It was the people, that band. So it's like, oh, because they're like half of them were gay, so let's just, it's funny. It's 2003 because gay people they're still a punchline. So that hasn't aged well, and so then he puts on those clothes, which are, again, just a set of leather gear, because, it's cool, but then he takes out sunglasses, and they're like Elton John ones, and they're all just pink stars, and then he just steps on them and crushes them, because masculinity is more powerful than gayness. Agenda. It's not even Cold War anymore, because the Cold War fucking ended, like, 8 years before this movie started, or 5 years. I think it's ended in like 96 or 98. But either way, this movie made in 2003. The Cold War is done. There is no Cold War themes anymore, even though they're still like, but nuclear detonation. Well, yeah, we still have nukes. I get it, but like, they haven't been as threatening since the goddamn Cold War, and that's what these movies fucking lack now. They all think that nukes is still as scary, but like, they're not as defined in our culture anymore. It's like, we know Hiroshima, we know the Cold War, but we don't live it. My generation hasn't lived that shit. I was born in 98, the Cold War was done. I've never been scared of nuclear bombs, I mean, like, not like duck and cover level scared, Like, the world could end tomorrow, Watchmen, who watches the Watchmen level scared, Like, that kind of paranoia. So, that shit's gone, and it doesn't work in this film, and it doesn't work in the rest of the films. Salvation is an exception. Salvation's like the major exception of all of these films. So this film as a sequel is just terrible. John Connor is boring and uncharismatic. Claire Danes is alright, I guess. Like, she's not really an action hero, but at the same time, she's meant to be Sarah Connor from the first film anyway, so it's just, who cares? Schwarzenegger, again, he's just angry and pulls everyone and pushes everyone, and there's no fun, and they're trying to relive that, oh, but I'm John Connor, and like, you look like my dad, and like, not actually his dad, but his surrogate dad, and it's like, oh, but do you remember when you said hasta la vista? And he's like, I never said that was a previous version of me, why do I have to keep explaining this to you? And just stuff happens. What is notable about this film? Lady Terminator, pretty decent idea. It sucks that she comes back in time and she spawns in a goddamn fashion boutique. So it's like, get it? Because she's a woman, and then she like steals a woman's clothes, speeds. I don't know why. Why would a TX speed? Like, they're not idiots. They shouldn't be, at least. But apparently this film thinks that they are. But it's just for this one scene where a cop pulls her over and she looks up at a billboard, and the billboard has bigger breasts, so she just enlarged her breast because Arnold Schwarzenegger thought that would be cool. Watch the audio commentary of this film, it's hilarious. And then it just, yeah, she has no real character, like Robert Patrick has more character, nuance to his character at least. She's just scary, but not really, but sexy, but not really at the same time. It's a weird balance. I gave it 3 stars because it still has some good action scenes. It still has something different to take, because it's like, oh, hey, look, now we're actually showing the construction of like the machines and stuff that they use, and focusing on the military aspect. So it's like the stuff that Dyson was making in the Terminator 2 goes to the military, and they perpetuate Skynet, and actually they use it as a system to fight a global virus that's taking over the American systems, and it's taking down a lot of American systems. So they're like, okay, let's use Skynet to destroy it, but then Skynet ends up taking over because it's still an evil AI. Which they've never personalized the AI, which is interesting, because that wasn't really a thing that they did in the early 2000s, like give the AI a personality. So it just becomes in itself like a virus. And so it just, robots start killing people. It's okay. If you want an interesting, mildly fun action film with Arnold Schwarzenegger, yeah, sure, it's fine. It's nothing. It's no Terminator 1 and definitely no, like, it's nothing like the first two Terminator films. It takes elements from them, but doesn't really do anything. But this is also the start of the franchise where they're like, oh, this idea is cool, like the liquid metal over the metal exoskeleton. Like, there are elements from here on out that all the Terminator films have that are interesting but never work. Or at least they do work, but the movie sucks, so it doesn't matter. So we just forget about it in the end. It's like, oh, but I like that one part where this thing happened. Oh, yeah, I like that one part where she just enlarged her breasts. And it's like, yeah, but what about the rest of the movie? And they're like, I don't remember the rest of the movie. Exactly. So let's talk about Terminator Salvation. Directed by McG and released in 2009. I actually watched the director's cut, which is 3 minutes longer. I don't know what the difference is. I've only seen the theatrical cut once, and I saw that sometime in high school. It was like on TV, and I liked this movie because it was like something different, and it was like just, that's cool. It's something different. It's set in the war, and it's set with John Connor trying to find Kyle Reese. So it's set a few years after Judgment Day. So it works if you watch the third one and go into this, because they're still going in chronological order. So this one was released in 2009. What did I have to say about it? I gave it 3 stars. It's probably, I'll do a ranking at the end of the video, but so far I'd go 1, 2, 4, then 3. Actually, that's a pretty legit ranking so far. 1, 2, 4, 3 is the current ranking. My quote, so that's what death tastes like. My review is, I guess I liked this when I first saw it about 9 or 10 years ago, about a year or two after it came out. But I definitely understand why it's so disliked. For me, the film lacks character. It has good performances, a style all to itself from the rest of the franchise, this being how it's shot, the mixture of CGI and practical effects, because it still uses a lot of practical effects, especially for the war scenes. It's very post-2001 war-esque film, but it works well enough, because it still is a war film, so they've still got the use of drones and stuff like that, which is very America 2008. But it's interesting to see it just being them against, like, pure survival kind of thing, and this was meant to be the start of a new trilogy. Of course, that never came to fruition because it didn't really do so well. I think it did well at the box office, but it didn't really do critically, so they just kind of scrapped the rest of the trilogy. So yeah, it has good practical and digital effects, and really great sound design. Now, I think as of like maybe today that I'm filming this, the 4K has been released of this film. Really, you don't need it. It's an upscale from the 2K. The Blu-ray is amazing. I would totally get the Blu-ray. The DVD of Terminator 3 was actually really good as well. It's got really good vision and good use of sound effects, and sound design. So I'd assume that the Blu-ray would be probably just a bit better in terms of visuals, but I don't know how well different the audio and sound design would be. It's loud, that's all I can really say. However, the narrative lacks any real tension, and even as a simple war film, it's just kind of meh. Like, it's very disjointed with the amount of characters that you have, and, like, you've got John Connor, who's like, oh, well, we all know John Connor and his wife, they were set up in the previous 2 films. And then you've got Kyle Reese, who you're now resetting up as a younger version of Kyle Reese, because that's, of course, John Connor's dad. Spoilers, but not really. Who's played by Anton Yelchin, which is really cool. And then you've got Sam Worthington's character, who's the main character, weirdly, and he gets put on death row and then wakes up after John Connor goes through the base where his body is, and then he just kind of gets out of there after a big explosion, and you're kind of like, okay, where'd he come from if he was meant to have died like a few years before this? And he doesn't know what's happening, so it's like he's kind of the audience character, because we don't know what's happening, but we kind of still do know what's happening, because again, we're getting all these, it's omniscient point of view, you're seeing everyone's point of view. You're getting the John Connor parts, you're getting the Anthony Elton parts, you're getting the parts with Sam Worthington, you're still getting your quotes of, come with me if you want to live and stuff like that. The third one changes them a bit, but still, they're very forgettable. I can't remember any of them being said in the third one at all, because they're so forgettable. But then in Salvation, they're kind of still there, but you just kind of forget about them. It's just fan service by that stage. I don't mind the bleak nature of it, given how that's the world they live in. It's very bleak and dark, but it is an apocalypse. Overall, it just lacks character and energy, something that the Cameron films screamed. The third one definitely does not have this kind of... It has a bit of energy, but doesn't have any character. This one doesn't have any character or really any energy. I don't mind this film as an addition to the franchise. I like it maybe just as much as Rise of the Machines. I think maybe a bit more, but it's hard to say, because the Rise of the Machines has some interesting and fun moments, and again has much better energy in the film. Whereas this one just kind of has boring characters, but just has an interesting idea, more or less. Again, idea, but not good execution. The interesting idea, it's a robot with human skin, but he actually thinks he's humans, aka Sam Worthington's character, because nobody likes Sam Worthington anymore. And then you've got, so that's an interesting idea, it being set in the future, in 2029 during the war. That's an interesting idea. But at the same time, the first three films already set up how things are going to happen. You know that they're going to find Kyle Reese. You know that John Connor's eventually going to send him back in time. You know that John Connor's eventually going to die because of a T-1000 that looks like he's... T-800... I think it's actually the T-101, but still it's a T-800 anyway, that looks like his surrogate father. And you know that they're going to end up probably winning the war anyway. Kind of. It's made very vague in the first three films as to whether they actually win the war. And even in this one, of course, there's no certainty, because even at the end of it, Sam Worthington sacrifices himself so John Connor can live. And I just don't really care. The dialogue especially is, really boring. And there's a lot of exposition, which is really shit. And a really shitty love romance between Sam Worthington's character and another chick. It's just, cool, I guess. He, saw her naked, once, kind of, while she was changing, out in the open. But so did all these other guys. Oh, let's kind of do a rapey scene, but then Sam Worthington's cool, so he'll stop them and kill them. Hoo-hoo. I don't know, I think that was part of the director's cut. It's weird. So, yeah, would I recommend Salvation? I mean, look, I wouldn't recommend any of these films past the first two, because the second one concludes it. They stop Judgment Day. Who cares? The future's not set. You can think of it all as parallel worlds kind of things. Each one's a different timeline. So it's, these ones, they literally expand into different timelines, from Genesis onwards. But it's what if, the fact that they're using time travel as it is already rewrites time, more or less. Except for the first one where it needs to happen, Kyle Reese and the Terminator both need to go back in time for there to actually be a timeline to exist, when you think about it, because it's Kyle Reese has to be there so John Connor can exist, and the Terminator needs to be there so its leftover parts can start Skynet, kind of. Depends on how you really look at it. It's not bad. The Blu-ray is really good, I can say that. The Blu-ray version of it, I'd say the director's cut maybe is better, but it's hard to say. Yeah, it does have a CGI version of Arnold Schwarzenegger. So let's talk about the next film, Terminated Genesis. Why do I have this film on Blu-ray? Because my dad likes it. I hate it. So that's a good impression of the start of the film. So this film was directed by Alan Taylor. Who cares who it's written by? Because it sucks. I've seen all these films before, of course. I'd seen only Salvation once before. I'd seen Rise of the Machines a few times as a kid, because again, we had a DVD. We only just got Salvation like a few weeks ago, because it was on sale. So I was like, yay, cool, $7 for a Blu-ray, nice. Genesis we had since it came out because Dad really liked it. What did I give it? I gave it 1 star out of 5. My quote: "I'm old, not obsolete." Well, this might be my only review of the film, so let's just read it out. Hi. Are you a dumb person? Do you like dumb action movies that pretend to be science fiction? Do you like boring characters, boring villains, a plot that's so overcomplicated that it has to repeatedly explain itself through visual flashbacks that you literally saw 5 minutes ago, and dialogue exposition that only exists to be shit? Then go die in a hole like this film should, because, yeah. That's my jokey part of the review, but wholeheartedly serious. Also a shadow puppet version of Naked Emilia Clarke, because this movie is rated M, PG-13. So is the first one, so is the second one. The first one still has a naked Sarah Connor, but isn't for the exploitation nature of it. There's reason as to why she is naked, and because it's a sex scene between her and Kyle Reese, because that's how John Connor is conceived. They're not just going to be like, wow, it was so fun to have sex with you last night. I've never done that before. Instead, it's just, it concretes their relationship. It solidifies their relationship and love for each other, because it's still an 80s film. So romance plots are still eek. But at the same time, it works. Whereas this film, it's just like, well, we can't have her naked because children are going to watch this one. And it's 2017, and nudity means we get an instant MA15+. So instead, let's just have Kyle Reese's ass, played by Jai Courtney, mother of God, and like never show Emilia Clarke naked at all. Not her ass, not her tits, not anything. Just parts of her naked body without showing anything, and a silhouette. And it's terrible. Actually, it's not even a silhouette, it's just a shadow. It's really bad. That was actually my main complaint after watching the first time when I came out of theaters. I'm like, she wasn't even naked. What's the point? You know, I mean, of course, I'm not just there to watch Emilia Clarke naked, but I mean, I'd watched Game of Thrones by that stage, so, you know. I also noticed that a lot of this film is shot from an objective point of view, and this is my main complaint. Outside of the shitty story that's overly complicated and the really bad characters that are awfully directed, awfully written, and are just terrible in general. I won't even talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger because, oh my god, he's kind of better than he was in Rise of the Machines, but at the same time, he just has more character in this one, and even that is just, I don't really care. Like, he's the Pops character, and he's just all this bad, I'm like her stepfather, but I'm now good instead of being a dick, and I know you have to fuck her, Kyle Reese, so I'm watching you, I don't care. So yeah, I noticed that a lot of this film is shot from an objective point of view. Nothing is subjective, and hence nothing feels human. The action is shot from a distance, or is filled with reaction shots, or bass drops, while the camera continually focuses on the spectacle. The bass drops, on the other hand, are really fucking annoying. Just because you have metal things that go clang, or magnets, doesn't mean you need extra bass. It's annoying, 2017. Stop using bass. Anyway, we never get the opportunity to feel the human point of view through the camera. In return, this movie is 2 hours and 6 or 7 minutes of explosion, but without the impact. The main example, I'd say, is the bus scene. It's shot on the outside of the bus, so focuses on the outside of the bus, focuses on what's happening on the outside of the bus. You look at the bridge, because it's the San Francisco Bridge, or whatever the fuck it's called. You focus on the cops, because, the cops are at the end of the bridge. They're potentially an obstruction. And Arnie's face, because he falls out of the bus, and then he just has his own, subplot happening in this whole entire scene where he just steals a cop car and just chases them and watches them, and then ends up grabbing them at the end, but, it's like he just doesn't do anything yet. They just keep showing him, just because it's, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you're all really here, not for a good movie or anything else. But we hardly ever see what happens to our main characters? They were inside a bus getting attacked by a robot version of John Connor because this movie gave away its fucking twist in the trailer. And even on the front cover, it gives away its goddamn twist. And it is also a really terrible poster. I really have to admit it's terrible. And it just doesn't make any fucking sense as to why they shot it like this. Like, this is a scene that could have been very tense, but becomes flat and lackluster. And that's what this film is. It's just flat and lackluster, and I hate it oh so much. You have no idea how much I despise this film. I watched it 2 days ago. It ruined my night so much that I could not stand. I couldn't even put on a second film after it. I'm like, nope, I can't watch anything else because I'm just going to ruin that film because of this experience of watching this piece of shit again. A piece of shit that's terrible. They have the T-1000 for no reason. Just because they have this whole first act is set in 1984, and then to get to the second act, they have to literally travel through time, and now it's a whole new movie, and it's like, what the hell's going on? And then John Connor's but like they have half of the first act is set in the future, which is set up for all stuff that we already know. The only difference is the fact that John Connor gets captured by Skynet, played by Matt Smith of all people. I'm sorry, Matt Smith. I love you, but oh my god, I'm sorry. So that is boring as hell, and it's not as cool as they think it is, because it's all just objective fucking point of view shots. I'm like, I don't care about any of this stuff. Like, none of my characters feel like they're in danger. They're just soldiers in a game that they're going to win anyway. And then they go back in time, and then, oh look, they were recreating the Terminator with the same shots, except a worse actor because everyone hates Joe Courtney, and a T-1000 instead, which doesn't make any sense. And then J.K. Simmons becomes the character that was a cop in this scene that sees all this stuff and then thinks about it for the next 30 years, and just fuck that movie. I hate Genesis. It's overcomplicated. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know anyone who likes it outside of my mum, my dad, and actually, mum doesn't like it because she doesn't really care much for Amelia Clark. Dad really likes it, and Noah really likes it. And they are like, how could you not like it? It's so cool, though. I'm like, no, it isn't. It's fucking shit. And the only cool moments are, like, all the stuff in the trailer, and even all of those moments are literally reveal the fact that John Connor's the bad guy. Stupid idea to begin with. Have all these moments of, like, I'll be back. Look, I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm the Terminator again. Because it's always about him coming back. It's not about anything else. This movie franchise becomes after Salvation. Actually, no. People think that nobody watched Salvation because it didn't have Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. Probably the case, but nobody really cares. The fact of the matter is that when they came to doing Genesis, the advertising campaign was, look, who's back? That's right. It's Arnie. He's back. And everyone's like, cool, let's go watch it. Oh my god, this movie's terrible. Why did we watch this? Because Arnie's back. But Arnie's terrible in it. I don't know. Oh god. Life choices and consequences all throughout. So yeah, it's terrible. It tries to be a reboot. It plays too much of we have all these other twists, but we're not going to explain anything because we're explaining this movie into 3 movies. And we're never going to make a sequel. So who really cares? This movie is now officially worthless. Like, at least with Salvation, they planned it for a trilogy, but they never set it up for more movies. Because it was its own resolved narrative in the film, and that's how you do a film that you're planning to be a part of a trilogy. You make it its own thing. If it doesn't do well, that's fine. It's its own thing, you leave it alone. Because you can't make a sequel to it because nobody wants one. Because, like, maybe the narrative was bad, or it didn't get enough money back. If it doesn't get enough money back, then, well, it's alright. We've already wrapped up the narrative. We don't have to continue it, but we have it there as a basis to jump off of if we need to. And then we have Terminator 6, Terminator 3, Terminator Dark Fate. Which is an overdone meme, but at the same time, this movie is pretty yeek. It's Terminator Dark Fate is a 2019 film directed by Tim Miller. Written by... who cares by this stage. It's written by 3 dudes. But it's also produced by James Cameron. What? Oh my god. By this stage, who gives a shit that James Cameron's back? He's producing, he's not directing. So what does it matter? He didn't even write it. Again, no Cold War theme, so it's pointless. What is the point of any of these movies post the Cold War? I don't know. But this movie's like, guess what? Linda Hamilton's back and Schwarzenegger's back. And it's a direct sequel to Terminator 2. And we started off by killing off John Connor. Haha. Didn't expect that, now, did you? Edward Furlong. You want a job? Fucking keep being a fat junkie or something. Terminator Dark Fate. What can I say about this movie? I gave it 2.5 stars, so it's my second worst reviewed of the franchise. Even though it probably is actually arguably better than Salvation and Rise of the Machines, but I just gave it 2.5 stars because I'm just tired of these fucking movies. You know, again, it's another one that, just like Genesis, has one decent idea at the end where it's because Schwarzenegger's Terminator is still outside of being an aging Terminator. Oh, it's a clever idea because now he can age. It's like he has regular human skin. They established this 5 movies ago. No surprise there that skin can age. And then they make him a liquid metal version of himself at the end of the film, which is cool, but who cares? Because it's Terminated Genesis. It sucks. And this film, I don't even remember what happens. It's just the second one all over again. Like, they've just remade the second one, but they're making this one a sequel to the second one. Linda Hamilton is just there. Arnold Schwarzenegger comes in the second half of the movie because the movie doesn't know where else to go. I love Mackenzie Davis. She's great. She's a human cyborg version. She's like what they had for Sam Worthington's character, except she knows that she's human because she knows that she's human and cyborg because she asked for the enhancements because she was protecting the main character, female character, who becomes the next John Connor, which is very unoriginal. The villain is is like the TX. It's just a dude whose the skin part of him is liquid metal and can come off his body and become a separate entity, and then it's a metallic robot underneath, which is probably the best version of that, but at the same time, I don't really care about it either, you know, because he has no character whatsoever, and that sucks. It really sucks that the villain has no character. They're focusing too much on, let's set up this new replacement for John Connor and Mackenzie Davis, and then we got to talk about what happened to Linda Hamilton, and we have to set up Arnold Schwarzenegger, but he's like the same character from the second movie, except that he's not, because he kills John Connor, and then, like the Terminator does in the third one anyway, and now he's had a family and stuff, so he's humanized himself over the past 20 years. It doesn't make any fucking sense, and it's so overcomplicated again. My quote, I'm reliable, I'm a very good listener, and I'm extremely funny. That's what Arnold Schwarzenegger says, because most of his lines are just for comedic things. Nothing else. Honestly, I came here for Mackenzie Davis, and she was, unfortunately, all that I cared for. Like, I love Mackenzie Davis, she's great, but I didn't give a shit about Linda Hamilton's character, or Schwarzenegger, or the main character, or the villain. I don't even know who plays the main character or the villain. And it's not just because they're actually, are they Mexican? I think so, like, I think the actors are of Latino descent, at least. Either way, I'm not trying to criticize them for being Mexican. It's pretty cool that the franchise was like, hey, let's be diverse like that, but also have, a female version of the Terminator, like the Kyle Reese character come back, kind of. And instead of it being like, instead of the main character being the Linda Hamilton from the first film, like they set her up to be, the twist is she's actually the John Connor version, because she becomes the leader of the Resistance, which conveniently the Resistance in the future is fighting against Terminators that look exactly like the Terminators that they fought for Skynet, but then these ones are actually made by a completely different program thingy called Legion, which is also a terrible name because it's so forgettable. Like, I only think of Legion for the TV show and the X-Men character. I don't think of it for fucking Terminator. And it just becomes weird. So, that's the thing. it was a slog, and there wasn't any action outside of the scenes where the gang chatting about Arnie's character of Carl. Wait. Oh, okay. It was a slog when there wasn't any action outside of the scene where the gang are chatting about how Arnie's character of Carl has become a house husband. Nice joke, but mostly an excuse for him just to like already have a developed character, because who needs character arcs anymore? No one. Yay! The action, on the other hand, had creative CGI elements. The action, on the other hand, had creative elements, but was mostly just kind of a mess of weightless CGI. But I mean, it's nice to see Mackenzie Davis being a badass, because she's like does most of the fighting in the film. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I like it. It's interesting. It's a different role for her, and I like that. I previously saw her in The Martian and Blade Runner 2049. I might do an actor review for her at some stage, but that means I have to rewatch Dark Fate. I don't want to have to rewatch Dark Fate. The commentary on the American system and its relationship with Mexico was interesting, but was it really necessary? I mean, back in the day, these were all about the Cold War. Now it's about the tension between Mexico and the US because of Trump, I guess. I don't know, but nor do I really care about this stuff. Like, I mean, I live in Australia, so it's not like I can really relate. Arguably I can relate, but I don't, because we also have the kind of asylum seeker thing, but I feel like that's different, but I don't know, because I don't really put in my day-to-day effort of reading the newspaper about some kind of biased news about, asylum seekers are bad or stuff. Like, I don't need this kind of politics in my movies. No, I'm kidding. It's interesting to see it on the take of the American system and the Mexican system, but it's such a busy movie as it is that it just becomes kind of crowded, just like the prisons, the concentration camps that they pretty much have as it is for people who are trying to get into the country. Like, it's just, God damn it, America, pick up your game. I guess the moral of this film is that the world is shit and will continue to not just be shit, but a nightmare for everyone, regardless of race, gender, creed, whatever it is. So, you in the asylum? Yeah, we're fucked in 10 years anyway because of the goddamn apocalypse. So, who really cares if you're trapped in the asylum? The robots are going to kill us anyway, I guess. I don't really know what the movie's trying to say. I really don't. Like the original ones were, again, Cold War stuff. It's Cold War. It's nuclear annihilation. What they're trying to say is that the world is shit scary. We shouldn't have to... This shouldn't be a problem. Like, we shouldn't have to worry about the Cold War. We shouldn't... but at the same time, it's kind of saying that we should worry about nuclear annihilation. Anyway, but this one's... And also technology. But this one's just kind of the same, but different, but confusing at the same time, because I don't really know what it's trying to get at. I guess it was interesting that they just kind of accepted the fate that was given to them over the possibility to stop it. Like, this film is Terminator 2, but not. It's like the plot from Terminator 1, but with the character arcs and stuff from Terminator 2, like, the John Connor thing in Terminator 2, but it's on Terminator 1, Sarah Connor instead. So it's like, we're not here to stop the end of the world, we're just here to protect the next John Connor. I guess it was interesting that the story had the element of the Terminator, but had the heart and soul of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, or at least it attempted to replicate the heart and soul of Terminator 2. Overall, it was better than Genesis, I wrote Genesis in like 3 different ways because I didn't know how to spell it. And the funny thing is, I still got it wrong. Nope, I got it right the second time. Let's hope this is the last one, because it's become too much of a character-piled mess to have room to care for anyone, even given the runtime. Like, it's 2 hours and, 10 minutes, and I just don't care. It's long, and it's a slog, and the action scenes are boring as hell. Look, they're in an airplane, oh my god. Who cares about airplane fight scenes? The Mummy did it fucking 2 years ago, and it was still boring. Who cares? P.S. Okay, I've given this film some serious thought and have recognized that thinking about this film is not what the filmmakers intended. That's because I'm disliking this movie the more I think about it. And yes, that is because I'm comparing it to better films in the franchise, aka The Terminator and Terminator 2. I won't get into the nitpicks that don't relate to previous films because I don't want to go on saying thanks, bye. Okay, that was my review. So yeah, that's my series review. What would I rank them? For Terminator 1, Terminator 2, probably Terminator 3, then Terminator Salvation, then Dark Fate, then Genesis. Arguably, Dark Fate is better than Salvation and Rise of the Machines. I just prefer Rise of the Machines and Salvation, even though arguably everything after Rise of the Machines is pretty forgettable and boring because the plots are just ugh, the characters are just ugh, and everything about it is just ugh. It really sucks that these movies kind of outgrew their necessity. Like, they went from, I don't even know what the hell they're trying to be anymore, cool action sci-fi movies, because they're not and they suck. So yeah, if you haven't seen Terminator Dark Fate, but you still like the other Terminator films, I mean, I guess you'll like this one. I mean, I still liked it, but I didn't, and I didn't enjoy it, but I liked it, if that makes sense. But I've also forgotten what happens in the whole entire plot because it's just boring. And yeah, that's my overly long video talking about the Terminator films for over an hour. So yes, thank you all so much for watching this video talking about the Terminator franchise. If you have any more franchises that you want me to do a calm and relaxed talk about, I will do that eventually. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Check out my other calm and relaxed videos somewhere here. I've done the Fast and Furious franchise and the Alien franchise. I'm planning to do the Friday the 13th franchise next. If that one comes out before this video, that would be awkward. So bye. Have a nice time.